Obviously, Piazza didn't mean to do that. My gosh, that's a blatant act.
What if I told you that the most insane moment in World Series history involved a broken baseball bat being hurled like a javelin at one of the game's biggest stars? And what if I told you it was just the climax of a blood feud that had been brewing all season? This isn't some made-up drama, folks. This is the true story of how Roger Clemens, one of baseball's most dominant pitchers, went to war against Mike Piazza, arguably the greatest hitting catcher of all time. A rivalry so intense, so personal, and so absolutely insane that 25 years later, it's still making headlines. But before we get into it, if you haven't already subscribed and turned those notifications on, please do that now. We have a huge giveaway on our road to 25,000 subscribers. If you have your notifications turned on and you are subscribed, you're going to be in a raffle for an MLB official jersey that we're giving away every single week. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into this amazing story. So let's just set the stage here, because understanding what made this rivalry so explosive requires knowing just how dominant these two players were at their peaks. Roger Clemens was the Rocket, a Texas-born flamethrower who had already won 4 Cy Young Awards by the time our story begins. This was a pitcher who once struck out 20 batters in a single game twice. A guy who threw 100+ mile-an-hour fastballs when most pitchers couldn't even dream of touching 95. Clemens didn't just beat hitters, he dominated them, and when necessary, he flat-out bullied them. Then there was Mike Piazza, a catcher who fundamentally broke the rules of what catchers were supposed to do. See, catchers were traditionally defensive specialists who could maybe hit 250 if you were lucky. Piazza, this guy was putting up 308 career batting average with 427 home runs, including a record 396 as a catcher. We're talking about a player who was drafted in the 62nd round as a favor to his dad, only to become arguably the greatest offensive catcher in baseball history. But here's where our story gets interesting, and this is crucial to understanding everything that followed. When these two titans faced each other, it wasn't even close. Piazza absolutely, completely, and utterly owned Roger Clemens. And I know what you're saying. It's not a rivalry if it's one-sided. But here's the thing. True back-and-forth statistical wars are actually kind of rare in baseball because of how the sport works. One, if a hitter constantly crushes a pitcher, teams stop putting them in that matchup. If a pitcher dominates a hitter, the hitter usually just struggles against them forever. Baseball's individual matchups naturally tend towards domination. But in every other sense of the word, this was a rivalry, a hatred, a living in your head rent-free. But back to the story. The numbers are staggering. In 22 career plate appearances against Clemens, Piazza hit 421 with 4 home runs and 10 RBIs. Let me repeat that. A 421 batting average against one of the most dominant pitchers in baseball history. Think about this from Clemens' perspective. Here's a guy who made a living making the best hitters in the world look foolish. And this catcher was treating him like batting practice. Every time Piazza stepped into the box against Clemens, it was like watching David versus Goliath, except David won every single time. Now, as we roll into the 2000 season, tensions were already simmering. The Yankees, with Clemens as their ace, were the defending world champions and looking absolutely unstoppable. The Mets, anchored by Piazza's bat, were emerging as legitimate contenders with dreams of their own championship. But the real drama was brewing every time these two teams faced each other in the new era of interleague play. Remember, this was when Mets and Yankees series was still relatively rare and absolutely electric. The entire New York baseball world would stop for these matchups. And every single time, the same pattern emerged. Piazza would step into the box against Clemens with that confident swagger, and Clemens would rear back and fire his best stuff. But instead of the typical result, a strikeout victim walking back to the dugout with his head down, Piazza would consistently make solid contact. Sometimes it was a line drive single, sometimes it was a double, and far too often for Clemens' liking, it was the ball sailing over the outfield wall. In June 2000 provided the perfect example. Piazza took Clemens deep for a grand slam at Yankee Stadium, a massive bomb that had Mets fans going absolutely crazy in the Bronx. You could see it on Clemens' body language. This wasn't just another home run allowed. This was personal.
The 1-0, a high drive to center, near the wall, a grand slam.
And what made it worse for Clemens was that Piazza wasn't just getting lucky. The catcher was systematically solving it, reading his pitches, and turning his best stuff into highlight reel moments. For a pitcher whose entire identity was built on dominance and intimidation, having one specific hitter consistently show him up was psychological torture. And the baseball world could sense something was brewing. Reporters were starting to ask questions about the matchup, fans were circling dates on their calendars, and Roger Clemens, well, he was about to reach his breaking point. The day is July 8th, 2000, Yankee Stadium, a summer day that would forever change the trajectory of both men's careers and create one of the most controversial moments in baseball history. The Mets were visiting the Yankees for their second interleague series of the season. The atmosphere was already electric, these crosstown rivals drawing maximum attention from the New York media circus. But what happened in the top of the second inning went far beyond typical baseball drama. Mike Piazza stepped into the batter's box to face Roger Clemens for what should have been just another competitive at-bat between two superstars. Clemens went into his windup and fired a 92-mile-an-hour fastball directly at Piazza's head. The ball struck Piazza in the helmet with a sickening crack that echoed throughout the entire stadium. Piazza crumpled to the ground and lay motionless for several terrifying seconds. When he finally did get to his feet, he was clearly dazed and his eyes unfocused as trainers rushed to his aid. The diagnosis was a concussion. Piazza was forced to miss the 2000 All-Star Game, an All-Star Game where he was supposed to be the starting National League catcher. Now, here's where the story gets really interesting. Clemens immediately claimed that the pitch got away from him. Just an accident. No intent whatsoever. But let's think about this critically for a second. This is Roger Clemens we're talking about. A pitcher with pinpoint control who had won multiple Cy Young awards specifically because of his ability to locate his pitches exactly where he wanted them. And this wild pitch just happened to target the one hitter who had consistently made him look foolish. The one guy who was hitting .421 against him. The timing is awfully convenient. And Piazza wasn't buying it for a second. In the aftermath, he said, "I have no respect or appreciation for his comments. Roger Clemens is a great pitcher, but I don't have respect for him now at all." And the baseball world was divided. Yankees fans defended their ace, Mets fans were absolutely livid, but everyone agreed on one thing. When these two teams inevitably met again in the postseason, fireworks were guaranteed. And boy, did they deliver. October 2000, the stars had aligned for the ultimate showdown, the first Subway Series in 44 years, with the Yankees facing the Mets for the championship of the baseball world. This wasn't just about a title. This was about bragging rights in the biggest media market in the country. For baseball fans, this World Series had everything you could want. Two legendary franchises, multiple future Hall of Famers, the biggest stage possible, but underneath all that pageantry and celebration, everyone knew the real story. Roger Clemens versus Mike Piazza, round 2. The subplot was irresistible. The pitcher who had put the catcher in the hospital would now face him on the biggest stage in baseball. Game 1 came and went without incident. The Yankees won 4-3 in a nail-biter that showcased everything great about October baseball. But everyone knew the real drama was coming in Game 2, when Roger Clemens would take the mound at Yankee Stadium. The anticipation was incredible. This wasn't just baseball anymore. This was personal. This was about pride, respect, and settling a score that had been brewing all season long. The entire baseball world was watching, and both players knew it. What nobody expected was that in trying to settle their feud, these two future potential Hall of Famers were about to create the most bizarre moment in World Series history. Game 2, World Series 2000. Yankee Stadium was absolutely electric. 56,000 fans packed into the cathedral of baseball, with millions more watching on television around the world. The stakes couldn't have been higher. First inning, 2 outs, Mike Piazza steps into the batter's box to face Roger Clemens for the first time since the beaning incident. The count had worked to 1 ball, 2 strikes, and Clemens wound up and fired a fastball. Piazza swung and made contact, but the pitch jammed him badly. And so, the bat exploded into multiple pieces, with the barrel careening directly toward Clemens on the mound. And here's where everything went completely insane. Clemens fielded the broken bat barrel cleanly. For a split second, everyone expected him to simply toss it aside and continue with the play. But instead, Roger Clemens, in front of 56,000 people and millions more on TV, hurled the jagged piece of wood directly at Mike Piazza.
That is a blatant act right there.
The broken bat barely missed Piazza, who was running to first base on what was clearly a foul ball. Both benches immediately emptied. Piazza, confused and angry, started walking towards Clemens, demanding answers. Piazza later said, "When he threw the bat, I walked out to the mound to see what his problem was. He really had no response. It was bizarre." And bizarre doesn't even begin to cover it. This was the World Series, the biggest stage in baseball, and one of the game's biggest stars had just thrown a weapon at another player in front of the entire world. The immediate aftermath was chaos. Players from both teams swarmed the field, but fortunately, cooler heads prevailed before any punches were thrown. Clemens, incredibly though, was not ejected from the game. The umpires restored order and play continued. But the damage was done. In that moment, Roger Clemens had transformed from respected ace to public villain. The incident was so shocking, so unexpected, and so completely unhinged that it instantly became baseball legend. In the immediate aftermath of the broken bat incident, Roger Clemens offered his explanation to a stunned media corps. He claimed, "I had no idea Mike was running on the foul ball. There was no intent there." His story was he thought the broken bat piece was the baseball and was attempting to throw out Piazza at first base. When he realized his mistake, he just threw it toward the baseline anyway. Now, let's break this down for a moment. Clemens expected us to believe that 1, he confused a jagged piece of wood for a white baseball. 2, he didn't see Piazza running to first base despite looking directly at him. And 3, that his natural reaction was to violently hurl the object rather than just dropping it. I mean, the explanation was so ridiculous that even Yankees manager Joe Torre seemed uncomfortable defending it. Recent revelations from Torre show that Clemens was actually crying in the clubhouse after the incident, suggesting he knew exactly how bad his actions looked. Meanwhile, the baseball world was having none of it. Media members, former players, and fans universally saw through Clemens' explanation. This wasn't an accident. This was the culmination of a season-long feud that had finally boiled over on the biggest possible stage. In the aftermath, Major League Baseball fined Clemens $50,000 for his actions, which was significant money in 2000, but felt like a slap on the wrist for such a dangerous act. The fine was specifically for reckless behavior, carefully worded to avoid saying it was intentional. But here's the truly wild part. The broken bat incident wasn't even the end of the story. The rivalry continued to simmer for years afterward, with both players trading subtle shots in the media and fans picking sides in one of baseball's most polarizing feuds. The immediate aftermath of the broken bat incident was swift and brutal for Clemens' reputation, and the broken bat piece itself was eventually saved by Yankees strength coach Jeff Mangold and sold at auction in 2014 for almost $50,000, turning one of baseball's most controversial moments into an expensive collectible. But the real damage was to Clemens' legacy. You see, before this incident, he was simply the Rocket, a hard-throwing, competitive pitcher who happened to intimidate hitters. After the broken bat throw, he became something different in the public's mind, a potentially dangerous player who might cross the line between competitive fire and outright aggression. And the timing couldn't have been worse for Clemens' long-term reputation. This incident occurred right as whispers about steroid use in baseball were beginning to surface. Later revelations about Clemens' alleged PED use would cast the Piazza incident in an even darker light. Was this roid rage in action? Meanwhile, Piazza emerged from the controversy as something of a folk hero. He had stood up to the game's most intimidating pitcher, taken his best shot, literally, and never backed down. The fact that he continued to dominate Clemens statistically only added to his legend. The two players faced each other one final time in June 2002, and appropriately enough, Piazza homered off Clemens for the 4th time in their careers, putting an exclamation point on one of the most lopsided yet most heated individual rivalries in baseball history. When it came time for Hall of Fame consideration, the Clemens-Piazza rivalry played out one final time in the most ironic way possible. Mike Piazza, the player who had been victimized in the relationship, sailed into Cooperstown on his 4th ballot in 2016 with 83% of the vote. His offensive numbers as a catcher were simply too overwhelming to ignore, and the Clemens incident, if anything, had enhanced his reputation as a tough, fearless competitor. Roger Clemens, on the other hand, despite his 7 Cy Young Awards and 354 career wins, he never received enough votes for enshrinement during his 10 years on the ballot. The steroid allegations were the primary factor, but the Piazza incident certainly didn't help his cause. Even today, 25 years later, Clemens still faces questions about the broken bat incident. At the Yankees' recent Old Timers Day, reporters immediately brought up the 2000 World Series confrontation, showing just how deeply this rivalry has penetrated baseball's collective memory. So why does the Clemens-Piazza rivalry still matter 25 years later? Why are we still talking about a broken bat incident from the 2000 World Series? Well, because this feud represents something larger than just two players who didn't like each other. This was about what happens when unstoppable force meets immovable object, when pride and ego collide at the highest level of professional sports. Modern baseball rivalries between individual players are relatively tame. We get the occasional fight or bat flip controversy or social social media spat, but nothing approaches the raw intensity and genuine animosity of Clemens versus Piazza. This rivalry also represented a specific moment in baseball history, the tail end of the old school era, when pitchers routinely threw inside and hitters expected to get knocked down. The beaning incident and broken bat throw were extreme examples of a style of play that was already becoming outdated. And that's why I think we just broke down one of the most explosive individual rivalries in Major League Baseball history. From Mike Piazza's statistical dominance over Roger Clemens, to the life-threatening beaning incident, to the completely unhinged bat throw in the World Series, this feud had everything. And 25 years later, we're still talking about it, still debating whether the beaning was intentional, still amazed by the broken bat incident, still marveling at how completely Piazza dominated one of the greatest pitchers of all time. And that's why, in my opinion, this stands as baseball's ultimate individual rivalry. Not because it was the longest, or involved the most famous players, or had the most back and forth statistical balance, but because it was the most raw, the most intense, and the most absolutely insane. Roger Clemens versus Mike Piazza gave us everything we could want from a sports feud. Drama, controversy, great performances, and a moment so bizarre that it transcended baseball and became just pure entertainment. And that's why we love sports, folks. Not just for the games themselves, but for the human drama, the personal battles, and the moments that transcend the sport and become legend. Roger Clemens versus Mike Piazza gave us all of that and more. But I'm curious what you guys think. What do you think of this rivalry? Or was there another individual player rivalry in baseball that you think was more explosive than this one and should be crowned as the biggest one in baseball history? Let me know in the comments below. And if you'd like, maybe I make a series out of this type of video. But don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives. That's all for today. I'll see you on the next one.